Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Strategy Talks and Mechanics Guide series. In this episode, we're going over something that was actually suggested to me in the video suggestions as part of the Discord. And that was a question about what are the best non-skill specialists to invest seeds into. Now, I think this is a very interesting topic of discussion because it doesn't get discussed all that often because typically speaking, we're rather limited on main skill seeds. And ideally, you're using your main skill seeds on your skill specialist first. However, I know that a lot of players can tell you that if they have invested skill seeds into a berry specialist that they're using all the time, they can find a lot of power in that. I myself have invested 5 or 6 skill seeds, something like that, into my Raichus. And I've used them everywhere. They've been phenomenal for me. So, there is a lot of power in using main skill seeds, even on Pokemon that are not skill specialists, if you are premium and have access to plenty of them. If you are free to play, I'd still recommend holding off and not investing in anything that's not a skill specialist, unless you're a very casual player and find that you're always running the same Pokemon because they're just your favorite, and you're kind of optimizing to the side. But if that's the case, then you're probably not watching my videos because you're probably not looking for the most optimal tips and whatnot. But if you have a favorite out there that you're running all the time, even if it's not the optimal choice and you just love it, that's probably one of the primary targets for your skill seeds because you're always getting usage out of it no matter what. But other than that, skill specialists take priority over like everything else. But then this is kind of the third thing of like, if you have the skill seeds to spare, then where can you put them? Now, for the first part of this discussion, I want to mention ingredient specialists. So, I wouldn't recommend most of the time putting skill seeds into ingredient specialists, because they're the most likely to get swapped off the team when you have enough of ingredients. Even if you've made enough ingredients to last you the rest of the week, then you'll still take them off, even if they're a mixed set. If they're a mono set, then they're really not the best target for it, because the whole idea of following the mono ingredient meta is you'll be constantly rotating your team so that you have the ingredient that you're looking for. Once you have enough of that ingredient, you take it off. So just naturally speaking, by the way that players run their mono ingredient specialists, they're naturally not going to get the most usage out of them. Now, I will mention, though, that if they have the Charge Energy S main skill, I typically would advise against this, but if they have, like, an energy recovery down nature, or if they have, like, main skill chance down, you find that you're really struggling with energy on them in particular, you can give them a main skill seed, and that will pretty much negate any problems with energy recovery almost indefinitely, because that skill does recover a lot of energy whenever it procs. So if it's one of those Pokemon, especially if it's like a Skeletor, if it's somehow struggling with energy, then maybe you can toss it a single seed just to make sure that it's never having issues with energy ever again. I think there are better uses for the main skill seeds out there than that, but it can solve a problem if it's got like an energy recovery down nature and you want to kind of counteract that a little bit. Or if your energy for everyone healer isn't quite good enough. I find that usually, though, if you have an energy for everyone healer and they just have that skill, that's usually enough to counteract any negative energy natures in the game. So, you probably don't need that. You probably don't. But I think it's the best usage for them. The other ones that get notable mentions are Cramorant, because Tasty Chance S is a really, really powerful skill and it doesn't take very many procs to be very valuable. And especially, I think if you were to happen to stumble upon a high skill trigger Cramorant, then I think that there's some interesting things that can be done there if you're struggling with Dedenne. I'd still say hunt Dedenne first and foremost for the skill, but Cramorant can kind of do the job well just because it doesn't take that many procs to actually do well with the skill. So there's something interesting there. And then Mr. Mime and Ditto having such a unique skill, I think that there's some things you can do with it. Just because they have the skill copy skill in their own way. Mr. Mime, it's Mimic, and in Ditto, it's Transform. So I think there's some powerful things that can be done on the right teams, but it makes you kind of consider what the rest of the team looks like. So I don't know. There might be something there, but it's interesting, especially with an energy for everyone healer on the team as well. There's a lot of strength that could be there if they're paired with the right team members. But those, I think, are mostly gimmicky and to have fun. Meowscarada is also kind of interesting, as well as Oh, there's another one with that skill, isn't there? I think there is. The ones that have cooking power up S, if there is another one, I may be just blanking right now. But Meowscarada, at least, it's got that cooking power up S skill, which I find to be... Oh, Luxray, that's the other one. Luxray and Meowscarada. That skill, if you are trying to make a particular meal that takes a set number of ingredients, and the ingredients that you're using, like let's say you're trying to make the top tier Defiant coffee dressed salad. Meowscarada has that skill. If you were to max out its main skill, then it would allow you to make that without a good camp ticket if you have a maxed out pot size. The same thing can be said about Luxray if you're trying to make the hidden power perk up stew. I wouldn't rely on these guys to reliably proc you that skill to make sure that you have enough pot size to make it, because they're ultimately ingredient specialists first and foremost. They're not going to be doing that job well. But I could see the case for if you want to make sure you're reliably proccing that skill and you're worried that you might have RNG issues with your Flareon, Glaceon, or Magnezone, then having these guys at max level main skill negates that RNG issues a little bit more. And they're also providing value to the team through whatever their ingredient is. In fact, maybe Meowscarada makes potatoes. Luxray can make oil. I know that both of those ingredients are in the Defiant Coffee Just Salad. So maybe if you have one of each of them, you might be able to make that meal consistently and reliably between the two of them. But I think that'd be a very niche thing for a very few select set of people that have that possibility out there for teams. I'd still say for pod expansion, rely on the skill specialist that does it first. And only think to these ingredient specialists when they have interesting skills. I've seen a lot of discussion before about Blastoise, Charizard, and Venusaur wanting skill triggers. I don't know where that kind of started. I think people just liked their skill of ingredient finding, especially how it kind of worked with the ingredient Pokemon. But realistically, I think that their skill doesn't proc enough for it to really be worth it. So, especially with them being ingredient specialists that you're likely rotating, I would not recommend investing skill seeds into any of these guys. In fact, I have them sorted right now by expected skill count, so the lower they are down here, the less likely you should probably be investing in them, unless their skill is of particular value for the Pokemon that it's on, like Meowscarada or Luxray. Quackable is also interesting, with a very high value skill with Charge Strength M, but I still wouldn't recommend it, because you're just trying to get the leaks and get them off there, so... or soybeans if that's the one you're running. Now, berry specialists are a bit more interesting, because when you run a berry specialist, you're running it all the time. Now, there is a lot of question as to whether or not this is worthwhile, because late game, a lot of berry specialists actually do better kind of ignoring their skill and just sneaky snacking, especially if you have Berry Fighting S and Favorite Berry. But I think they can work as generalists if you have the right, very powerful spread on them. And here I have them sorted by expected skill trigger count per day. And I found this interesting. Feraligatr actually ranks in higher than Slacking. Now, Slacking is people know it as like the confused Pokemon. It doesn't know what its specialty is. It is a berry specialist, but it's got a stupidly high ingredient rate, so it's like it's trying to produce a lot of ingredients. And it's also got a really high skill trigger rate despite being a berry specialist. So like, it kind of does all three specialties at once, and that leads to it being terrible at all three. So if anything, you'd expect this guy would have the highest skill trigger, expected skill count per day. But it's actually Feraligatr. Now, I think that's kind of balanced out, and Feraligatr skill is overall a weaker skill than Ingredient Magnet. It is just the Charge Strength S, but it is variable. As you can see here, that some of the highest procs per day is on the Johto starters. I think that the Johto starters, if you have a really good Johto starter, then it is very easily one of the best targets for sub-skill seeds if you're looking to other things aside from skill specialists. Now, Arbok and Altaria also rank in rather highly here, but whereas I think there can be a little bit extra value if you're struggling with energy on your ingredient specialists, on a berry specialist, it's just excessive, because you are intending to run them overnight. You are intending to keep them on the team 24/7 to always get those energy for everyone procs. So you're not going to be struggling with energy on your berry specialists. If you're struggling with energy on your berry specialists, your entire team is struggling for energy all at once. So helping out a single Pokemon isn't going to really help that. So I wouldn't recommend on these ones in particular, especially since these guys are really high berry value Pokemon that have higher ingredient rates. They're more likely ones that you would like to sneaky snack. So I wouldn't suggest these guys. Slacking, maybe, because it's basically a skill specialist if you don't have the actual skill specialist to do its job. In fact, this is the only one where I would actually consider it to be like a skill specialist in the way that it functions, despite having the berry specialty. So I wouldn't recommend even making it into a slacking if it's got good berry specialist skills. So slacking is probably the most likely of all the Pokemon for you to invest your skill seeds into if you're not looking to actual skill specialists. As for the rest of these guys, I mean, Raichu can be good because it is a very good generalist. But then kind of below the Raichu, I don't know, it kind of falls off. But in terms of procs per day. But notable things. Alolan Ninetales has a very, very powerful main skill when it is on a berry specialist. In fact, so much so that if you actually evaluate it in terms of like generalist, actually this isn't really generalist because this is them having favored berry, but if you evaluate it in terms of comparison to the other Pokemon that are in existence in this game, the Alolan Ninetales actually comes out as the best berry specialist, even though it really doesn't function like that when you actually look at it. It's part of how the calculator takes into account how the main skill works. But I don't like the skill on other Pokemon on skill specialists because it works better when it procs on berry specialists. And sometimes ingredient specialists as well if you need more ingredients. Its skill is more likely to proc on a berry specialist that can get the good value from it when it itself is a berry specialist, because if it procs on itself, that is good. You like that in the case of Alolan Ninetales. You don't like that in the case of Arcanine, or in the case of Jolteon. It's better for Ninetales to have that than skill specialists with the skill. So that's why it ranks in so highly here, and why it goes up quite a bit in value from between base main skill level, which is what I have here, to main skill level 7, which is how this is evaluated. So I would say the other ones that you'd be looking for is when evaluating for total strength, how much do they jump when you give them the main skill seeds. And as you can see here, Feraligatr does really well. Steelix actually drops quite a bit, which is interesting because the person that sent this request in said they have no regrets for full sending Steelix. That's another thing to consider. If you're using a Steelix all the time, if you have like a very funny ass health bonus Steelix that's got great stats, then sure, invest in it. Because that's ultimately the first and foremost thing. Is I'd say if it's something that you're using all the time, the consistent added value, sure, a Feraligatr may do better with the seeds. But if you're not ever running Feraligatr, then you're still not getting any value out of those said seeds. So I'd still recommend the Steelix over the Feraligatr for investment if you have the right stats. So that's really kind of what it comes down to. But the ones that I think benefit from it the most are going to be your Ninetales Alola, even though it doesn't proc very much. It's just a very good skill. The Johto starters, because they proc quite a bit. Raichu, because it's just a very strong Pokemon to begin with. And it does gain a decent amount of value. Not as much as the others, because it is the fixed version of the skill. And then Weavile, I think, and Houndoom as well. Houndoom, because it's got a very powerful main skill. It's got Charge Strength M, which is unique because it is the only berry specialist to have Charge Strength M, and I believe the only non-skill specialist alongside Quaquaval to have Charge Strength M. So I think Houndoom does very well. You can see it jumps miles with the skill seeds. It goes from being Sleepers eligible to being one of the top 10 berry specialists in the game, number 7 of all of them, if you just invest the main skill seeds. So Houndoom is definitely a reasonable target for that if you have a phenomenal Houndoom. And then also notably, Weavile actually drops here when you evaluate it this way. But I think Weavile's main skill is definitely one worth consideration. the calculator doesn't really evaluate it correctly when doing it here, because the way that it's accounting for it is it's boosting the strength of Weavile's ingredients. It's cooking power up. But if you are a very ingredient-focused player, as a lot of players are currently, then just like with Cramorant, I said Cramorant, you can run it for just a little bit. If you get one proc, that's a lot of value. Same sort of thing with Weavile, but you'll be constantly running it. So you can't really swap it around like you would a Dedenne or maybe even a Cramorant. It's got the lowest proc rate of the three, but it's always on the team. And the sooner you get a meal crit, which you're more likely to do the more procs you get, the sooner that you can have that first proc happen again that increases the that has the most value. So I think there is something for Weavile if you catch a very good Weavile and you're a very ingredients focused player. If you don't do a lot of cooking though, Weavile's skill won't come that in handy for you. And I really wouldn't suggest investing that main skill up unless you're finding that your meals are their base value over like 100,000 in strength as like the base value for the meals. But yeah, I think that's kind of the best evaluation of which Pokemon should really be getting, like, be the interest for your seeds. Eevee Holiday. I entirely forgot about Eevee Holiday. If you have a good Eevee Holiday and you find that you struggle for Dream Shards, I think it can be a good option, just because getting a few extra, like a lot of extra, it can add up quite a bit. A lot of extra Dream Shards, despite it having a pretty low proc rate. Getting that while also having a good berry specialist, but once again, I wouldn't suggest it if it's got skill trigger sub-skills and nothing for berry finding. It's a berry finder first and foremost, and that is also the thing to remember for this. These are berry finders first and foremost. Don't invest in them just because, oh, they have a lot of skills. Just leave that to skill specialists. And the same can be said for ingredient specialists as well. So, yeah, if you have enjoyed the video and maybe learned a little something, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I like talking about topics like this, how to strategize in Pokemon Sleep. So, yeah. Down in the description, there should be a link to our Discord. Love it if you come join Hangout. If you have video suggestions of yourself, any questions that you want answered, you can leave those in the video suggestions chat as one user did for this video. And yeah, as always, I thank you guys for watching and hope that you all have a wonderful day. Bye-bye now.